Today, it's Edwin's Monday evening property rant. Hello again, it's Martin North from Digital Finance Analytics, one latest post covering finance and property news. Monday evening once again, and Edwin is back with me. Hey Edwin, how you doing?
I'm doing fine, Martin, but I'm looking to travel overseas at the end of the year. So I was wondering whether you had any contacts with Qantas to upgrade me from economy to first class. I'll upgrade Dusty. I mean, not me, Dusty.
Well, yeah, if you know the right number to call, who do you need to call, eh?
I was thinking of calling 1-800 Hedonics. 1-800 Albo Real Estate, Albo Real Estate Partners and Co.
Well, yeah, well, talking about real estate, we might just highlight that tomorrow in our live show, we're going to actually talk about who needs a real estate agent now, because there's some interesting changes in the market and questioning what the role of a real estate agent is. You're going to join me for that, Edwin. That should be a really fun conversation tomorrow. And I think we're going to reveal some quite interesting surprises with regard to how the real estate agency system works. Should be fun. But I guess today we should plow on with what we're going to talk about now. And I guess a good place to start was good old Elon. You know, he chucks out a few posts today, doesn't he? I guess he's got nothing better to do than just support his, platform. And this one came out. Memes do a better job at reporting current events than the mainstream media. Yeah, interesting idea.
Oh, look, I think that hit the nail on the head. Just in relation with tomorrow's, Martin, did you let our viewers know that I think you bought one of the robots? We're going to test them out, one of Elon's robots, and put it out in the front door. Just collect names until people go in and ask the question on the way out. What's your offer?
Well, it makes an interesting point. Yes, you know, maybe a robot is the solution. We argued the other day that you could use robots to build houses, so why not use them to sell houses too? Good idea.
Yeah, look, but in relation to the memes, right? I mean, we joke around about it. We've been putting up memes on the show for a number of years, but I think to be fair, we also had a few on ScoMo Real Estate Brothers, and so really, what I put up, and I think what you and I were discussing pre-election and just post the election was in relation to the immigration policies, the lever that was going to be pulled by either side. Whoever came in was the one that was going to pull that lever anyway. And also, I said back then, 2 years ago, over 2 years ago, I said that that they won't scrap negative gearing, and it's even now. I think our treasurer said that he won't scrap negative gearing, but some of those classics remain there forever on the web. Our memes that we shared, and I think it's reality, and this is what's getting Albo into trouble now, and has been over the last throughout the year, from the beginning of the year. His property portfolio. I mean, he's entitled to have a property portfolio, but I think it's just the announcements and the ongoing purchase of other properties. His latest $4.3 million property in Central Coast. It's just the timing and the optics of it that's really got himself in trouble, as well as everything else, all the shenanigans that it's getting up to. And I think we're going to do a bit of a piece on Albo watch later on in the show as well.
Well, we should. There's certainly plenty to chat about there. And of course, the amusing thing or the concerning thing is that there's a road that he passed for the construction thereof before he bought his property. So he's now he's going to have a nice shiny new road to allow him to get from his new property to the main road. It would be nice if you could actually say, hey, I'm going to buy a property there, but just let's put a new road in first to make it easy to get to.
Look, the argument is that's been in the planning for a while, but it just so happens that it's being approved now. $100 million. So the house cost Albo 4.3, and the road's going to cost the taxpayers 100 million. How do you, as they say in the game, how do you like them apples, right?
Yeah, nice when you've got the power to do such things. And talking about power to do such things, we should just pause on the New South Wales rental reforms, plastered now as the biggest rental reforms in over a decade, banning no grounds evictions, for example. Interesting.
Well, look, the reforms are, in the most part, are great. I really, I'm all for it. When I ran a rent roll for almost just a bit over 18 years, we never charged our tenants for any of the stuff that agencies get away with charging tenants now. And it was, back in the day, it was always that you had to give tenants different ways to pay, and predominantly ways that they weren't going to get slugged a fee for paying over the net. Admittedly, we also took cash over the counter, and you couldn't refuse cash or check for that back in the earlier days over the counter. But you had to provide a way that would not make the tenant pay an extra fee. So a number of those points there, 4 of those points are welcoming points. I mean, I really can't wait until the New South Wales government start following suit with the making homes, making properties fit for use, or the minimum standards as they are called, because there are a lot of derelict homes out there that are being passed as rental properties, and there's a lot of people that are suffering from living in them, from apartments, townhouses, medium density, small density, to houses and so-called granny flats, makeshift granny flats that are people made out of garden sheds and asbestos riddled old asbestos riddled garages. So, but with regards to banning no grounds evictions, that is really, are we biting more than what we can chew with that, given what's happening in Victoria? And perhaps you'd like to read that it's a small extract from what we discussed before in the show as to what are going to be test cases, Martin, with regards to people contesting the eviction notices by the owners.
Yeah, it is interesting. And just before we look at that one, let me just show you this one. This was actually an article that came up specifically regarding the eviction notice. The measures will outlaw no grounds evictions. Millions of renters will feel the impact of no grounds evictions in their lives. This is the single most significant change that we can make to residential tenancies, he said, which is interesting. But it was also framed by saying, finally, relief for Sydney's renters. Rents have begun to fall or freeze across 2/3 of Sydney, and a raft of landlord reforms, with experts heralding the price changes as a sign that the worst of the rental crisis may be over. The biggest rental price drops in Metro Sydney over the quarter were in North Willoughby and North Balgowa, where houses were renting for $200 less last week. And interestingly, in rural New South Wales, the Illawarra region had some of the sharpest declines over the quarter, with units in Belimi dropped 23%, while both units and houses dropped in Corrimal by up to 15%. Now, that's quite interesting, and it's good news in a way that we are seeing a bit of a fall in rents. But just to highlight the fact there that if you are a property investor and you're relying on your rental income, and suddenly your rental income's dropped, that's going to put more investors under stress. So there's no such thing as a free lunch here. And I think that's the first observation to make with regard to all of these changes in regulation. And I agree with you that the whole idea of no fault evictions is actually something that should be addressed, because people are being shoved out on the street simply because the property investor can then potentially get a higher rent later, but maybe that's now changing. But then you make the segue into the Victorian story, because, of course, Victoria was the first of the major states to effectively impose extra obligations on property holders for investment purposes. And we're seeing some of the consequences now. Firstly, of course, we are seeing price falls in Victoria and a lot of property investors selling their properties. And then, as you say, the Victorian Civil Administrative Tribunal are basically, well, they're actually intervening in a way that's quite interesting and not necessarily the way that perhaps people thought. A clause inserted in the Residential Changes Act states that possession orders, just one step to forcibly evict tenants from their homes, must be reasonable and proportionate. It means an eviction is no longer a given if a valid notice to vacate is served. But then, of course, there's always a little bit of a question. Experts say prevents homelessness, forces landlords to maintain tenancies they'd rather end. And it's interesting that, you can see the two sides of the street here struggling, really.
Yeah, well, see, the test is what the member deems to be reasonable in terms of, in this case, it's a choice between an injured, the father of the owner of the property that can barely hold a job and needs accommodating, or is the health of the current health of the tenant and the son, by evicting them, and it's alleged that it's not just alleged, it's there in the NCAT that she applied for 300 properties. I say alleged because I don't know how true that is, but it comes back to remember what they deem to be reasonable is your father's, your partner's, your siblings' illness lesser than than the tenant's illness. What is the test? Because if this is the test on face value, and from what I've read so far from the different articles, and I haven't yet read the actual. I'm waiting for it to drop onto Ostley. The actual the full arguments that were put forth, and also the members' decisions, why they made that decision. For me, knowing that NCAT, VCAT, the tribunal is a very emotive, let's say, it's a very emotive court. It's the lowest judicial court in the states. So therefore you're really waiting on the decision of a person that you now have to influence. I'm not saying that judges can't be influenced or magistrates can't be influenced by arguments, by good sound arguments that lawyers and solicitors and barristers make. That they can be influenced to an extent, but it's more, the higher you go up the rank, the more black and white the letter of the law is. Hence the reason why you've got appeals and so forth. So in situations like this, I see that there's going to be a lot of appeals. Now, generally, you don't get appeals. Decisions aren't appealed, in the tribunals, because to appeal a matter in, let's say, in NCAT, for example, in New South Wales, in the tribunal, there, the fee is $400 plus in order to lodge an appeal, and you still have to lodge an appeal based on the merits of the matter, and also on perhaps on legal grounds, in terms of whether you've got to prove that the member made the wrong decision and so forth. So and generally, when a lot of these matters and a lot of these cases that are these matters that are heard in the tribunals, they stem from cleaning, to perhaps owing, rental arrears, that may be a lot less, a hell of a lot less than the $400 that you pay to lodge an appeal. And furthermore, right now, and I dare say it would be the same in VCAT in the tribunal there in Melbourne, is that there is a huge backlog right now. They are pushing a lot of matters to be heard before they break over the end of the year. So, and if you want to lodge something now, property managers are waiting, up to 4 weeks to have just to have the preliminary hearing, which is generally they want to have a resolved over mediation, and then if it goes to a formal hearing, you're waiting till the 17th of January now. So in between, one particular case matter that happened last week that we heard was where there was a dispute. And it was actually an eviction notice as well. So bottom line is the poor bastard, the owner of the property, is not going to be getting any rent because they couldn't come to terms. The silly thing from the side of the owner of the property, but couldn't come to terms and couldn't mitigate something. They couldn't come to terms on the day. And opted to fight it out of principle, but that principle is going to cost the owner of the property potentially no rent between last week until the 17th of January, when it will be formally heard. So they're the issues. But however, going back, and as Donald Trump said, doing a bit of the weave here, we go back to the matter at hand. Where I think a lot of these decisions are going to be appealed, and which is going to burden the tribunals a lot more, which means we're going to have such a bigger backlog of matters to be heard. And the warning for our viewers, and our followers. The first warning, or the first, is if you're going to be managing your property, you're going to be self-managing a property. If you don't believe in property managers, well, you better be squeaky clean in terms of you better dot all your I's and cross all your T's when it comes to documenting, when it comes to paperwork, when it comes to forms, when it comes to notices, when it comes to periodic inspections and everything else. Because if you don't have those on hand, and this is what Dusty and I have been hearing and watching over these cases, because a lot of these cases are from people that are self-managed, that have self-managed property portfolios that are from Asian backgrounds. And that's how come we come across them, because of the connections there and what we hear and what we see, based on assistance that people reach out for us to help them with. So this is what's going to happen, Martin. But sadly, it is going to be very contentious. But if those two cases, as we said a couple of weeks ago when we first raised this, if that's going to be the case law, well, you know what? It's really only going to deter. Initially, it will deter a lot of landlords from wanting to come in, and it's going to, it's a bit late now for those that have thinking, they thought they were going to beat this bullet. Then it's late. So it really comes back to who the member is on the day, and how persuasive you're going to be, and what documentation that they're going to have. I mean, when you read this article, this was a Domain article that I posted up. They're part of the Domain article. And when you read that, I mean, this lady went as far as to get some sort of affidavit, some sort of a letter from a doctor to say that if she was evicted and she became homeless, potentially she could die. I mean, that may have been the case. I mean, but that is a very persuasive argument. And so what do you need to counter that? Do you need to say that if, what did the owner? The owner just literally didn't have a leg to stand on. And he was predominantly, I believe, was the decision was based on was based on that. But you've got to ask yourself the question. I mean, there's a lot of, I'm sure the legals that watch the show, will sort of have a lot of questions running through their head. But as I said, I haven't read the full transcript, honestly. I really do want to read it to understand it a bit better. But it is a minefield that we're going to be walking into.
Well, generally, I have the view that if you have to get the courts involved in anything like this, there are really no winners. Because by definition, well, the winners are, of course, the lawyers who actually often make quite a lot of money through the process. But the court system is slow and cumbersome. And in a way, to me, signals a breakdown of the relationship between the landlord and tenant. And I think that that's really the root cause of the issue. And I understand why, states like Victoria, New South Wales have come out with stronger protection for tenants, because in many cases, you and I both know that tenants have been taken to the cleaners. But I'm not sure that this legal set of processes actually are going to create that many winners. It's just going to create a lot of heat rather than light. The other side of it is that some property investors will say, the risks are too high now, I'm not going to even bother. And with the very low returns in Melbourne, so the negative cash flow returns on many investment properties there, people are just going to say, I'm going to give up. And so you might end up with actually less property available. So there are so many losers and so few winners in all of this. And I think it comes back to my perspective, which is that these interventions now from the states are very late in the day and are really probably closing the door after the sheep has run out of the stable. Now, I deliberately mixed my metaphors there, right? Because I actually think that's part of the problem. We've actually got a real confusion here about the role and purposes of investment property and rental property. And if you do lose the relationship between the landlord and the tenant, and insert, for example, a manager in there who really has no interest in the human side of the story, that to me is part of the problem.
Oh, it's a huge problem. And this is what I've been calling out for a decade and a half, if not 2 decades. And that is that we've been losing the seasoned property managers. They've jumped the fence and gone over to greener pastures, and they've become salespeople because it's an easier route, because they weren't looked after. And I said over 15 years ago, watch this space. We're going to get to a point where the majority of property managers and property management teams out in Sydney are going to be made. The makeup of it. I'm not. There's a lot of smart young people, but they don't have the lifelong experience, the expertise. That expertise and experience is what really enables somebody to become a great. It's a pathway to become a great property manager, because you have to be seasoned. You're dealing with very highly charged adults that are emotional, and a lot of officers. Because they want to downsize the expenditure. They want to, minimize the expenditure. They've gone from paying seasoned, property managers to getting kids that are just come out of school, 17, 18-year-olds to perform the duties of property officers, and then graduate into property managers, and this is why you get this a mess. In the meantime, as I said, the seasoned property managers left the industry, went into a commercial management or the like, or into sales roles if they stayed in the real estate industry. But that's. I called it, 15, 18 years ago. I could see that the writing was on the wall, and it's only going to get worse, Martin. The unfortunate thing is that it's only going to get worse, and we're going to, I think when we spoke with George a few years back, I raised the point that in relation to safety it's going to get worse when you got these pressures on the rental arena, when you got these pressures that everybody's going through, and then you have to issue an eviction notice. You have to issue a notice to comply for one thing or another. That's going to put a burden on the tenant. It's highly charged, and if you ever get a chance, any of our followers and viewers of the show ever get a chance, I mean, you can go to the to a tribunal. You can sit in and you just sit there and just watch how highly charged those those matters that are being heard are. If and I'm talking about also between property managers and tenants, as well as self-managed properties and tenants, and and hence the reason why they've got a lot of security in these tribunals.
Yeah, very good point. And I think that we're going to see more and more of these cases come to light, and more pressures. And standing back, and in fact, this particular headline is quite important, I think. Housing fix marginal at best. This is really quite an important article. We've been saying for some time that all of the stuff that's been going on is really not helping that much. And this article talks about the lack of courage and conviction of Labor and coalition leaders in tackling the tax reform issues and the property-related issues. And they also highlight where some of the money has gone, particularly in Labor seats. And it goes on to say that the dueling housing policies of Albanese and Dutton in response to Australia's home ownership crisis and spill over into immigration, superannuation, infrastructure and tax will decide who wins the next election, which is a bit of a worry. They've planted toxic seeds which have baked in a housing and rental crisis that will take years to reverse. The faults lay squarely at the feet of all three tiers of government, and councils, state and territory governments have failed to unlock enough land, have become obsessed with red and green tape, and for too long have enjoyed the gravy train of housing taxes, infrastructure charges and rates, which increase year on year. The housing crisis, along with concerns about migration infrastructure, will now be the main issues for sceptical voters, and it all comes down to whether Albanese or Dutton will sell their plan better. And I guess, Edwin, the point to me is that, again, what we're seeing here is the ineffectiveness of policy, but also the politicization of the discussion around housing, to the point where it's actually very, very difficult to find a way through the through this whole issue. And for many people, frankly, it's much, much more complicated than the politicians are arguing. And there was an article that I did over the weekend called Opening the Housing Affordability Can of Worms. There was a hearing last Friday. It was a Senate inquiry into the whole question of housing affordability. And I made a show on it because this was really quite interesting, seeing some of the debates. The banks were trying to argue for, well, just allow us to lend more, so reduce the interest rate buffers. But there were some very, very good presentations and arguments from people who said, no, you've got to understand that this is a much, much more complicated thing. And I took away at the end of this that really, policies have been politicized to the point of bilio, and the real issues are not being addressed. And until they are, we're going to see more shenanigans.
Well, the thing is, the commentator there in that article, I mean, it just seems to me like he's just binge watched some of our shows over the last 4 years. Because nothing you and I have been saying for a while. The problem stems from all levels of government, from local, state, and federal. I mean, this is what I've been trumpeting for a very, very long time. But again, it's just something that it just goes around and around in circles, like that mouse that we say that just goes jumps on that on that wheel. You called it something else. Yeah, but it's something. But I put a post on X, and and it's is it any wonder? Look, at least the Liberal Party of I believe they won the Queensland election. Is that right? Correct me if I'm wrong, Martin.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yes, yes, yes.
Uh,
Didn't win by as big a margin as people expected, but they
No,
did they did
but at
win.
least he put out hope, right? He put out hope. Remember our post in relation to dreams and hope? At least he's given them, he's given the people hope around housing. But that's a whole, like the politicization of a something that every household in Australia should have. Every Australian should have that. If not ownership, but that security. But everybody feels insecure from homeowners to renters, and further insecurities around retirement. Where do you go? Where do you go? How far out do you have to go? How far away do you have to go in order to retire comfortably? And and as I've been saying for a while, and we've been saying on the show for a while, it's more expensive to get older in the outer regions of Sydney and New South Wales because of the lack of infrastructure. But hey, we can get an upgrade on our spouses' tickets, to travel overseas and have a great time. And I'm sure, a lot of politicians do that.
Yeah, well, different world. Different world, isn't it? Now, there was a little bit of good news. Oh, I thought it was good news this week that maybe people are also listening to us on another issue, because we've been saying for some time that high rise is not necessarily the answer, not least because a lot of people don't want to live in high rise. And in fact, there was an article here from The Guardian. Premier plans to make Victoria the townhouse capital of Australia in a bid to help millennials own houses. So they're allowing property owners to subdivide or build two homes on one plot without a permit. Now, that was quite interesting because subdivision, rather than building up, potentially does seem to me to have some advantages.
Huge advantages, which is something that we've been banging on for a long time. That is what and this is what I've been saying from the 80s. That was stifled. Local government authorities became all of a sudden, changed a lot of the controls, and it became so much harder to put up a shed in your place, and or even a carport. I mean, the planning controls just became the red tape just became horrendous. And look, I think the Premier, we got to call it for what it is. I believe she's on the money. You could criticize her and the government about a lot of other things, but in this case, I think she's on the money. But let's just point out the fact that the townhouse in Victoria has a different meaning to our townhouse. When we think townhouses, we think small density development. Like we think of splitting a block into 4 or 6 adjoined properties. In this case, I think it's more to the point of what they're alluding to is more duplex development, which as I said, some of my developer associates and friends have said to me, it's watch this space, and we shared 3-4 months ago that I said watch this space, and we'll wait and see what happens in November when because there's going to be the state government is going to release similar planning for people to. And I think we also did a show on that, and asked the question. Certainly asked the question on X: is land going to become cheaper if all of a sudden, blocks of land could be subdivided or into duplex sites? Is it going to become cheaper, or are they going to be? Is it more valuable as a freestanding home, or is the block of land or the parcel of land more valuable as a development site. I mean, there's a lot to talk about that, and that was a discussion that I put up on X, and this is where they're going. But and it's interesting when you read the that's an extract from the actual speech that she gave, which is rather interesting. We won't read the whole lot, but it makes a point, and I think it's a great move, in the right direction. But again, we also go back to who's going to build them. Who's going to build a lot of these? I know a lot of these parcels of land are going to become very, very appealing in your affluent markets, because if when you've got your markets in the fringes or in the outer fringes of the Melbourne region, well, you've already got close to 23,000 homes, freestanding homes up for sale anyway. So you'd be mad to build in the current position that they're in, because so many investors want to jump ship. So it's going to be interesting what happens moving forward. But I can see there'll be a lot of the builders, developers, property flippers are going to start eyeing out, and we're going to see potential price rises in those markets. As I said, in those prestige markets, prestige areas, because they're going to be very, very valuable to cater for the downsizers that don't want to move away, and have got a lot of coin by selling their properties in their older homes in the first instance.
Spot on. That's right. Well, it could certainly change the dynamics of some markets. But there's another factor here that I think we should think about, right? Let's assume that 10% of properties in those areas are subdivided and ultimately turn into two properties rather than one. But that means you're going to have a significant increased demand for water, electricity, gas, if it's still there, parking, all those services, and potentially increasing also the traffic flow in the immediate area. So I wonder whether the infrastructure implications of this sort of strategy have been thought through. I'm suspecting probably not, because whilst, one property being turned into two properties doesn't necessarily do much to the overall infrastructure demand, if you have a lot of people doing it in parallel, then that's going to put huge amounts of additional infrastructure demand on already stretched infrastructure. So once again, I wonder whether there's joined up thinking here.
Yeah, you've got a lot of amenities that will certainly have to be accounted for in upgrades. Like I said, you've got to really, but it's a matter of choose your poison. So because with a lot of this infrastructure, as you said, electricity, for example, I mean, we're going hell for leather to become carbon neutral or some shit. Like, what is it? Like 2030? What's the caper there? Like, where we're going to be fossil fuel neutral or something? We're going to be. But the thing is, in order to power up your stoves, in order to power up your induction cooktops, you're gonna have to upgrade your electrical system, and I don't believe that at the moment, in the future, who knows, or who knows what's around the corner. Solar, it's got its shortcomings as well. I mean, then you're going to have to start talking and really seriously talking and discussing nuclear, right? So that's another topic for another day as well. But you really have to start opening up a lot of other issues, and so you can't have the whole cake and eat it. It's got to be as I said. In a way, for them, it's choose your poison. But I go back to the need, the greater need. It's interesting how it's interesting how the town, I highlighted it says townhouses are exactly the kind of homes we need to build, or duplexes. But I'm sort of thinking, as you are, Martin, you even in these affluent areas, like you said, you've got a street that has 25 houses on either side, and you go 50% of that. That's another 25 dwellings on one street. That's just the street. Then you got the suburb, but where as a I get the feeling this is it's going to be this is going to benefit more the areas where the younger generation want to live in, because if it was really simply about housing and housing affordability and just I'll move wherever it takes in order to house my young family. Well, like I said, there's 23,000 to choose from, in the greater fringes, but they don't want to go there.
Well, that's right, exactly right. And it is interesting. I mean, I lived in a particular street down in the Illawarra, and over the time that I was there, probably maybe up to a quarter of the properties got effectively turned from one property to two properties. So they were on quite large plots, 800 squares or whatever. And so it was quite easy to sort of just slice it down the middle and put two up. But the increase in traffic in the street as a result of that was quite significant. And it was a quiet street, but just parking and more cars and all of those things. And I just think sometimes I question whether the consequences have been thought through. Here's another example of consequences not being thought through. This is actually from Leith Van Onselen, who I had on the show last week. Australians brace for a second boom in defective apartments. So buying a new high-rise apartment in Australia is a game of financial Russian roulette. Well, we've been saying for some time, and there was the 2019 Four Corners report titled Cracking Up, which revealed systemic issues in construction quality across the nation's apartments. They're still doing that. And of course, they're building down to price in some of the high rise that are being built at the moment. And whilst the approvals are continuing to sort of fade away, the chances are that we are going to see more people struggling. And interestingly, Edwin, in one of my conversations this last week, in my one-on-one series, I was talking to somebody who had bought a high rise about 4 years ago. And there are defects now that are being identified such that the strata costs are going to go through the roof over the next year or two. Now, they were hoping very much to be able to sell the property and then go and buy a house somewhere. But now they're finding that it's impossible to actually get anybody to buy the property because of the risks from those defects that are now being reported, and also the rising strata fees. So what we are finding is that quite a few people who bought high-rise are now sitting on a property they can't actually sell, and the capital value of the property is also falling because of these risks. I mean, these are huge, huge consequences of poor quality construction, which are now flowing through.
Yeah, and this is what I said earlier on. Choose your poison. Melbourne, choose your poison. Right? So if you want to really hit it home, you which one do you prefer? Take a teaspoon of arsenic or rat poison, because that's what you got a choice. Or just in very, very small doses. They even say that arsenic could be beneficial for to counteract some cancers in your system. I mean, don't go out and try it, folks. But the thing is, mate, this is the unfortunate thing where you are in Victoria, which is why I keep on saying, and I seem to be labouring on it, and that is, get rid of the investors from the property arena, and you've got a shit show on your hands. Yep. Get rid of negative gearing, and you've got a shit show on your hands. And if Melbourne isn't the litmus test to show you what getting rid of negative gearing is going to do, in terms across on a like a ad hoc proposal, without which is what a lot of people would like to see happen. They all of a sudden think that that's going to bring the property prices crashing down, and they're going to be able to afford to buy in. Well, why aren't they buying in? Why aren't the renters buying in Melbourne in droves? Why are we getting why have we now got 31,000 listings on the domain property portal for the Melbourne region, and God only knows how many more in the outer regions of Melbourne, where all the investors basically got pushed out because of bad government policy. This is why I said 3-4 years ago that that the Labor government wasn't going to won't get rid of negative gearing, and they certainly weren't going to the next election with that promise on hand, and even a watered down version of it, perhaps, just to keep people at ease. But with everything else that's happening, we're really moving forward for a shake-up. But in the meantime, Martin, where the reality is, as I said, when you got to give credit where credit is due, where the current premier, where she's pushing for the small density developments or the duplex the developments, like it or lump it. In my opinion, that is right now that is the best that is the best way to go, because even a lot of cashed up developers that don't want to build high rise for the same reason that's been brought up in the issues of the the geotech reports that we've got across Sydney, where we shouldn't be building, but we still build. That Lee brings out in this for the second wave of defective apartments. I mean, there's going to be a second, there's going to be a third, and there's going to be a fourth, because construction isn't the code isn't getting any better. It's not, and we're not really keeping up with the population needs, and that's just one side of one side of the equation. The other side is, as you mentioned earlier on, Martin, and that is the whole infrastructure that has to be built around it, and we have to dig up all these old terracotta pipes for the sewer lines, and old galvanized pipes, which isn't a bad thing for you to do, for property owners to do anyway. Is to update the sewage systems and update the pipes coming in from the street into the house, particularly if it's all galvanized. You don't know what you're drinking that's coming out of the tap. So, but all this has to be upgraded, and upgrade the electrical grid, and everything else. So it's we're in for buckle up. Go to Woolies or Coles or Aldi and get yourself a very big bag of popcorn and start popping, because it is the shit's going to get funnier, and it's going to get weirder over the next 4 to 6 weeks.
Well, talking of weirder, we're not going to talk about WeChat chats this week. We're going to move into, let's call it Albo Watch, shall we?
That's it. Let's move into Albo. Because the WeChat chatters are very silent. We're very, very silent this week, and I think they will be for another couple of weeks. So Albo Watch. So I saw this post come across my thread. And the first one is obviously the hot water that Albo is in with regards to upgrading the not disclosing the upgrades that he received by his old mate from old mate from the CEO of Qantas. So it's really bad optics. I mean, good on him. You do what you can for your partner. I would have done the same for Dusty and Evan. If I was traveling, I would have tried all my best to upgrade to first class if I could. If you got the contacts, but unfortunately, the poor bastard, he didn't disclose them didn't make disclosure. It's a different. But he wants to be the hero in that relationship. Unfortunately, failed anyway, apparently. So that's bad optics. The second bad optics was the buying the $4.3 million property at Central Coast, when there's a national housing crisis, and the news was all around that. I mean, and of course, coupled with that, was Taylor Swift not bidding at his property at at Dulwich Hill, and losing favour with his he maybe lose his Swiftie membership. So I'm calling it, Martin. I'm calling it now. I think my prediction number 10 is going to come. Is going to come to pass. Perhaps I said before the end of the year. That was my prediction earlier on in the year, that our current PM is replaced before the end of the year. So look, he's certainly pushing that pedal to the metal to get there quick. But the question is going to be who's going to be his replacement? Penny Wong? I don't know.
No, well, there's an interesting question there, and remember that there's an election next May. And I find it quite interesting just reflecting on that, bearing in mind that the stories that we're seeing, particularly from the IMF, was quite interesting this last week. So the IMF came out and said that it looks as though the deficits are going to be there for quite some time, and specifically highlighted that the inflation rate in Australia will be probably the second highest among the top 20 or 30 places across the world. With inflation in Australia at 3.6% next year, only behind the Slovak Republic. And I did a show on that called Inflation Fears Still Haunt, especially Australia. And if you look at that carefully, what it means is that there's very little chance of the inflation rate coming down sufficiently for the RBA to be able to cut rates prior to the election. So we are probably going to see the election next year running up to inflation still being pretty hot. I think that's going to be quite interesting in terms of just watching the dynamics. And then, of course, as we said earlier on, well, we know that the housing story from both sides of politics, which is all about political positioning rather than actually doing anything useful, will be another critical part of the election campaign. I'll also make this observation. It's interesting that we mentioned Queensland earlier on. The Labor Party, of course, threw lots of money at the electorate ahead of the election to try and reduce cost of living pressure, right? And in fact, a lot of the people out there in the electorates across Queensland saw through it. So just saying we can actually provide you some, short-term relief, which is what Chalmers has been doing basically, is not necessarily going to cut the mustard when it comes to the story with regard to the next election. So I think there's a lot ahead. And so your question is a good one. Will Albo still be in the number one position by the time we get to the next election? Could be interesting.
Oh, yeah, look, I might have been off by maybe a month or two, but I'm still putting my money on perhaps Penny Wong, heading into the next election. But yeah, look, with what the Labor ex-Labor Premier proposed, with what was it, lunches or something. He should have defined that. He really should have defined that. So I don't know who his PR people are, or who he subscribes to, or who subscribe to, but they really let him down. He should have been very, very specific. He should have said a meat pie for every Queenslander, and it should have been very, very specific. Meat pie, sausage roll, and sauce. I mean, that's I got through school that way. So, look, it's meat pies and sausage rolls, staple diet. But because throw in a Vegemite sandwich, he should have been more specific. But then you look at the Liberal side of things. He really focused on that. I think the last one was, which the post that I put up there was that hope. That bringing back hope for the great Aussie dream, which is what people of all ages are really looking at, and that's what they're going to be, towards the next election, as you say. That is going to be really the policies that's going to drive home are the ones more that are going to be looking at that security. Because a home, whether it's a rental, whether it's a principal place of residence, it's all about that security, that longevity. You don't have to pack up your bags every 6 months, every 12 months, or every other period, and having that so that you can put some roots down in the suburb that a lot of these people grew up in, and they don't want to move away. So yeah, housing is going to be a major issue. The interesting thing there, Martin, I think, was also I believe the Greens didn't fare too well in that election either.
No, they pretty much disappeared. So that's quite interesting, isn't it? Which tells you something quite important. And just talking about the housing issue, this article is quite important. So this was a report from CoreLogic, and I think CanStar was involved in it as well. But making the point that there's a massive shortfall for a single average income earner hoping to buy a median house in Sydney. It's more than $948,000, and for units, the gap was $335,000. And even a dual income couple would still be short about $271,000 for a house. And so that really highlights the question of the bank of mum and dad. Now, I, of course, have been covering the bank of mum and dad for quite some time and arguing that it's been a very significant element in terms of housing, particularly in Sydney, but also in areas. And you mentioned, it's impossible to buy in Sydney. Well, this report made the point that Sydney was just an impossible dream. And the analysis says that buyers would leave Sydney in favour of regional New South Wales, such as Central Coast, Newcastle, the Hunter Valley, Southern Highlands, or Shoalhaven. But that itself isn't the answer. The spillover of demand creates a rising tide and affordability challenge for people living in those areas as well. So the great Australian dream of owning a house wouldn't be accessible for those. So you're caused to rent forever. And even, high income, dual income households have an issue too. And so if you aren't fortunate enough to have a bank of mum and dad or bank of grandparents, your ability to access the property market is now massively warped to the point of almost in being impossible. And that for me is the real critical challenge here. So you can talk about, the political discussion around the edge and trying to do a little bit here and a little bit there. I don't think they're going to be significant in terms of impact. But this is the root cause issue we've got. Property is now massively unaffordable, unless you've got parents to help.
Yeah, and that's a crazy thing. And how quickly did we get here? How quickly we do? But nobody, again, we'll go on to the numbers now because we'll just bring out the obvious, and that is the government policies around immigration, overseas students, and the like. So if you're going to look at it, if you're going to be serious, you've got to tackle everything, not just go out there and on one policy or two. And I think a lot of younger people, the younger voters, are looking through a lot of these announceables. I can't think of another description other than that, Martin. I think they've got a lot more smarts than a lot of the politicians are giving them.
I agree. And just one quick one before we get on to the numbers. There was this post from Alex Joyner, which I thought actually summed it up rather well. The banks get it all the way in the end, yet they're always pushing the boundaries to lend more, lower credit standards, lower the mortgage buffer, extend loan terms, etc. This comes despite the Australian household sector being one of the most indebted in the world. So you can see there that the ASX 200 BANT index and the Capital City Dwellings Index total return both up significantly, and look at the acceleration in recent times. So if you want another signal of the property market and the whole system is broken, is look at the behavior of the banks and look at the banks effectively pumping more mortgages out there, lending for investment purposes up 35% over the last year, for example. And you can see there that the root causes are very profound and won't be solved by those little announceables that we've been touching on this time around. So let's now quickly move on to the property story. And this is the listings based on the domain definitions. On the 21st in Sydney, 21,737 properties listed for sale. On the 28th, 21,000 919. So the count continues to rise. And well, the trend is very clear now, isn't it, Edwin? We're definitely seeing an acceleration relative to last year.
Definitely, and a lot of it is because a lot of properties are just being passed in as well. They're not meeting the market, if I could use that term, and the expectations are still very very high. So then obviously they don't reach what the agents promised the vendors they would get them, and then they go on private treaty, and that just adds to the volumes, and it has been adding. Look, again, let's raise the point that it's not every market or not every suburb is acting the same way. So there are, I mean, we see some astonishing result in some parts, and even under private treaty. But there is a formula, and that formula we're going to talk about tomorrow as to what houses are selling. That is part of what we'll be discussing in tomorrow's live rant. It's why certain homes sell, and how we can teach our people, our viewers and followers, to better be prepared for to achieve the better sale of their property, the better sale price for their property.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that tomorrow, and of course the underquoting or the you got a new term for it. Remind me what you call it now.
Oh well, it's deceptive. The deceptive and bait advertising.
Yeah, bait advertising. That's
bait advertising.
Yeah, no, that's right. And so there's a lot of that about at the moment. And, the bottom line is, of course, that we're seeing markets wobbling in some areas. But again, let's underscore it. Not all markets are behaving the same way. Not all types of property are behaving the same way. We'll cover that more tomorrow. Let's look in Melbourne. So on the 21st, 30,457 listed. Again, a lot of houses there. 30,507 the week later. So same trends really in terms of, the market's still, well, there's a lot of stuff there that's not that great from a quality perspective, but there's a lot of listings. Looking at Brisbane on 21st, 4185, and then a week later, 4258. So even Brisbane listings are beginning to rise now. And in fact, if you look at the auctions, the clearance rates, the clearance rates were relatively low. And the forward views, I think, as to what may be happening over the next little while. Remember, of course, we've got the Melbourne Cup and what have you next week. Well, that will impact Melbourne in particular. But overall, the auction passing, it looks to me as though it's continuing to rise, where more people are actually withdrawing before listing, or indeed are actually passing in at auction.
Yeah, and this is the nature of spring. You got more competition on the ground, and you've got to see a lot. As I said, a lot of vendors are being the conversation around the traps is where with the number of agents you got. I guess our followers and our viewers need to understand. I talk to a lot of real estate agents, old colleagues and associates that I've had over the years, and and they're the ones that feed me what's happening on the ground and tell us and keep us abreast. And they tell us how people are being told, like one of my good friends. One of my good friends has got his property on the market. He went counter to my suggestions as to what agent he should use, and the reason why he halfway through the campaign, I already knew why, but he confessed to me, but I already knew that he got greedy because I always said to him that his house was worth between 1.8 if he wasn't cleaned up, tidied up, and 1.9 if he did tidied up the areas that I told him to tidy up. I had another agent, another colleague, old colleague of mine from that area that agreed with what I had recommended, but he got somebody from outside of the area that told him that he was going to get 2.1 million. the auction was supposed to happen over the weekend, and crickets. And now the guide's really low. But the good thing about my old mate is that he stuck to his guns, and he told the agent, I'm not accepting anything lower than what Edwin told me I was going to get, which is 1.9.
Excellent. Yeah, well, that's right. Let's quickly look at the rentals. So in Sydney, on the 21st, 11,878. The following week, 11,934. So a small rise there. And if I look at Melbourne, 11,308 on the 21st, 11,332 on the 28th. So slight rises. And the rate of rental growth does seem to be easing. And there's a sort of suspicion that maybe things are turning slowly, although I'm not quite as convinced as some that we've seen the end of the rental rises. Now, as we come to the end of the show, Edwin, just time for your tip of the week. And this is a really, really important tip if you're thinking of a unit or apartment.
Well, yeah, we spoke about the people moving into and having to choose to move into apartments because they've got in a lot of cases there's no option. And what Lee put out about the second wave of the issues that many are going to be talking about. And as I said, there'll be a third wave and there'll be a fourth wave because we keep on building these monstrosities. But one of the tip which we've discussed in many shows in part is don't just check your apartment that you're buying. Don't just check the new flooring, the new carpet, the new floating floorboards, the swanky new kitchen that they put in there, or polish that up or whatever. Then just look at that. You should be spending a lot more time in the common areas, because even that strata report that you get from the agent and from before you buy scenario, that is only a snippet of what you should be what you need to look at. That, and a lot of the stuff that you see in the common areas you won't find in the strata reports anyway. So that is critical and crucial. So I'm helping my daughter and her boyfriend. Her boyfriend's looking for a property, and that's what I've been teaching them for the last 3-4 weeks, is to how to look into. And I've inspected a few apartments with them, and now they've got the knack of things. My daughter wants to go out and buy her own moisture meter reader as well. I said, you don't need to. So, but look, we spend more time. We spend more time in our inspections, and the agents that open the properties for us to inspect, they're baffled as to why we spend more time in the common areas than what we do inside the apartment that they're trying to upsell you on. Not it's a new kitchen, it's a new this, it's a new light bulb, it's a new paint job, blah blah blah, and that'll give you an indication of how proactive the owners corporation is. It also gives you a great indication of how many owners are in the complex as opposed to just tenants. There's a lot that you learn from looking at it, and also helps you to understand, Martin, in one of the apartment blocks that I put up on one of my Twitter posts. I noted some of those inspections down, and I put on there. And what a lot of people don't realise is the lack of maintenance around some of these apartment blocks where you don't get a lot of sun and you end up getting a lot of mold and moss growing on along the walkways, and they are hazard. They are trip hazards for your tenants. They're trip hazards for visitors. One slip on that, and you could do a lot of damage, and the liability is huge. Also, in one particular instance, the salesperson was trying to tell him, "Oh, look how great the balcony is and everything." But we've already done a tour of the complex beforehand, And yeah, the balconies on the front side of the complex, they look great and pretty, but the balconies on the rear end, I said that's going to be. I said, I hope you've got $10,000 in your pocket, because you're going to have to contribute to fixing all the balconies and the water issues at the rear of the complex. And my daughter said, but Dad, but they're not ours. Then I had to obviously explain to her why, being a common area. So these are a lot of the things that people don't understand or don't know, and haven't been taught, because they just fall for that trick. Come and look at the shiny new bench top. Come and look at the swanky new bathroom, and or apart from all the other issues that you and I have been discussing on the show for many years.
Well, that's a very important tip, and be careful, particularly with the tarted up places that actually come on the market, and then you don't look beyond. You should look beyond. And the other point I'd make also is turn your ears on when you go into the common areas too. Listen to the amount of noise, and particularly, echoes and noise from other parts of the complex, because if you hear it during the day, you're going to hear it even more during the night. So that's something else to bear in mind too. Edwin, I want to say thank you very much for another great show. I just remind everybody that we will be back tomorrow with our live show, 8 p.m. Sydney time. Who needs a real estate agent now? And Edwin will be joining me for that conversation. So mark your diaries and join us then. And otherwise, Edwin, I'll look forward to seeing you tomorrow. And then, of course, next Monday for our normal rant. So we'll see you then. Talk soon.
Looking forward to it. See you guys tomorrow.
See ya. Bye. Thank you, sir.